So we are beginning my English version program, Politics with Buzarov Andrei, and we are beginning our first English version of program from Boao. This is a small city in Hainan, in China, and here we actually participate in Belt Road Initiative, like representatives of Ukrainian media. So we have a good opportunity to speak about different representatives of various media from all over the world, Asia, including Asia, Europe, China, and I have already spoken with different representatives of this media, with experts, with journalists. So we are starting our work, and we will show you what is one belt and one road, or one road, one belt. What is the sense of such new initiative? Actually, it is a Silk Road, new Silk Road, modern Silk Road, and we will analyze together and with our colleagues the concept of such good initiative. На форуме «Один пояс, один путь» будет с представителем Сербии, с человеком, который был в свое время министром иностранных дел Сербии, который глубоко знает китайско-сербские отношения, возглавляет организацию, которая ответственна за китайско-сербские отношения. Я задам вопрос по-английски, хотя господин Живодин Иванович знает хорошо и русский язык, but I will ask in English, it's better. Yes. Because we will have our international community. So, if we speak about Serbia and China, I know that Serbia is one of the countries in so-called format 16 plus 1. 16 plus 1. It means not only Serbia, Croatia and other countries. What are real relations now between China and Serbia in economical, for example, and political sphere? Despite that Serbia is very far from China, and Serbia doesn't have borders with China. What are the main priorities of cooperation?
In the past, Serbia had excellent political relations, but very limited economic cooperation. Now I can speak about the balance between political trust and economic cooperation. Serbia is one of the most important partners of China in the group 1+16. China has constructed the first bridge in Europe over Danube in Belgrade. The first steel factory, Chinese property in Europe, is in Smederevo, Serbia. The first Chinese buses on batteries operate in Belgrade. The first high-speed railway China is constructed from Belgrade to Budapest, a project which may be one of the largest investments in Europe. It is a railway long over 400 kilometers and valued close to $2 billion. So China has the first national bank representative office in Belgrade. Right now, China is constructing one of the largest cultural centers in Europe in Belgrade, which will be over 40,000 square meters. And also, Serbia is the only European country which has abolished visa system with China. So as of January this year, for instance, Chinese tourists don't need visa to visit Serbia. No Serbian tourists need visa visiting China. And this is a factor that made our tourism exchange 20% higher this year than the last year. And in many aspects, really, we are leading among all Central and East European countries in cooperation with China. Why? I think Serbia has a very very advantageous geopolitical position, being on the south-north axis. And China has one strategic project which is called Land and Sea Express Line, which starts in the port Piraeus in Greece and leads toward the Central Europe. How to go to Central Europe by land if not to reconstruct and modernize more than 1,000 kilometers long railways from Athens via Skopje, via Belgrade, Budapest, leading to, let's say, Northern and Baltic Seas. So we are very happy with the results. I think that up to now, more than 20,000 people in Serbia are employed in Chinese finance projects. In addition to what I already said, it's worthwhile mentioning that China is constructing highways on the corridor 8, linking Belgrade with the Adriatic Sea.
So we see that the sphere of cooperation is widely spread. I think that we in the future make a special interview about China and Serbia. I want to thank you, say thank you very much indeed for your vision of bilateral relations between China and Serbia, and for us, for Ukrainians, it's also very important to understand that China wants to develop the relations between the countries, not only in Asia and in Europe also. So Serbia is a good example of bilateral relations between European country and China. Jack, thank you very much for your time, for your expression of vision of current situation. I know that you represent Zambia media, private media. You know situation in not only in Zambia, very good, in Africa. Why China is so interesting in Africa, and why your country, Zambia, is interesting for China as a partner, as a trade, political partner, and so on?
First of all, China and Zambia have been friends from as far back as 1960s. A traditional relationship. China built the railway line that ran from Zambia to other, neighboring countries.
Okay.
And it's from that background that Zambia and China have been, cooperating friends. Today, China is developing infrastructure in terms of roads, schools, and hospitals that were not developed in the past. And now that the world is developing, Zambia could not fall to any other partner but China in order to move up with the development that is going on at the moment.
And if we speak about Zambia, I know that Zambia was very stable and still is very stable. I mean, there isn't any kind of wars in your country in comparison with other countries in Africa where there are civil wars or different geopolitical involvement. So your country is quite stable despite the multicultural ethnic and other particularities.
Yeah. First of all, Zambia has 74 different tribes. And obviously with that kind of number of tribes, you expect that there could be conflict. We've never had internal conflicts, and Zambia is surrounded by 8 countries. It's a land-locked country surrounded by 8 countries. And you would think that with so many countries around Zambia, there could be conflicts. We've never had any fight or conflict. The reason is that the founding president of Zambia, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, taught a philosophy of one Zambia, one nation. Despite being so many different languages and tribes, he taught the Zambians that they are one. And that unites the entire continent. And even after, when Zambia got independence, the founding father thought there is no way Zambia can benefit from independence when their neighboring countries are not independent. And so he started supporting the other countries so that they can also be independent. That's what keeps Zambia at peace.
So it's very wise decision. Yeah. And Jack, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And we will ask other representative African countries about their vision of bilateral Chinese and their country relations. So we will be in touch. Hungary is one of the countries from European Union who are actually the member of so-called format 60+1. Right. It's a special format of cooperation between China and European countries. I know that many Hungarians media is interested in cooperation with China, and Chinese are very interested in cooperation with Hungary and with European Union in general. What can you tell about this cooperation between the states and between the societies?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the important thing to know that Hungary has one of the biggest Chinese populations, Chinese diaspora in Eastern Europe. Probably in Europe as well, but I wouldn't go that far, but definitely in Eastern Europe. So cooperating with China sort of comes naturally. There are a lot of second-generation Chinese who are speak perfect Hungarian. They were born there, born in Budapest, and they speak perfect Chinese, perfect Hungarian, so they are a very good connection. And as in terms of what is going on, well, it's on every level. It's on cultural level, it's on trade level. There is now a direct rail connection between China, freight trade.
And really, Hungary is just a gate to European Union.
Well, that's probably for the Chinese. Yes, it's a good option. But yeah, we are willing to do that. I mean, if it's coming through us, that's definitely good for Hungary.
So it's
also good for China.
Potentially, it's very good cooperation can be.
I would think so. Yeah.
So Attila, thank you for your brief and very accurate interview.
Thank you.
And I think that we will speak more not only about China and about Hungary, but Ukraine and, for example, Hungary. So Manish, thank you. Thank you indeed for your time. I know that you are specialized in India-Chinese relations. Not always India and Chinese relations were good, it was stable, but now it's quite stable, quite good. I know that you have a special magazine about Chinese-India relations. You analyze the situation very good. Officially, India does not participate in this new Silk Road initiative, but you have good relations on economic level. What is happening between India and China?
I tell you, India and China have multi-layered relations, you know. Not many people know that China is India's largest trading partner after the United States.
Ah, really?
Yeah. So the relationship, economic relationship is very robust. Of course, there are issues about trade deficit and all that. And, you know, we had a difficult time, India and China, last year because of, you know, the face-off between the troops. But this year, starting from the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Wuhan in April, this was, by the way, I'm going to explain the context of this meeting. This was the first time the leaders of India and China met in an informal setting. It's called informal summit. One is a formal summit with all the pomp and pageantry and, you know, with the set agenda. This was the first meeting without no preconceived agenda. The idea was to get the leaders to know each other better, their position, their view, and all that. So I think this signaled a very clear political, strategic intent on part of both India and China, at the top level, the leaders' level, to develop better relations. And the last few months have been very positive. There is a great deal of, there is a momentum, there is a predictability, there is positivity in the relationship. And, you know, since Wuhan, the leaders met twice actually, one in Qingdao, it was SCO summit, followed by BRICS summit in Johannesburg, and now they're going to meet again in Buenos Aires, in the margins of the G20 summit. So it's been a very positive, and a few new initiatives have come to maintain peace and tranquility on the border, to scale up economic relationship. In December, we are going to launch P2P mechanism. People to people. So these are all very positive initiatives. This is contrary to the picture of India-China relations, which is sometimes seen as adversarial and negative in the outside world. So, I mean, by and large, I see, at least in the near term, it's getting back on track. There is positivity, there is momentum. We need to build on that. Coming to the Belt and Road, you know, in Wuhan, this has been a contentious issue for India, because China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a vital part of One Belt, One Road project, goes through a disputed region of Kashmir, which is claimed by both India and Pakistan in its entirety. So from India's point of view, that's our territory. So when CPEC goes through Indian territory, it amounts to, in India's assessment, violation of India's sovereignty. It's about sovereignty, right? So what our position is that India's position. I don't speak for the government. I'm just articulating the yeah. So you know, on One Belt One Road, there will be no meeting of minds as long as the sovereignty concern is not addressed. If the Chinese can take that portion out, then India has no problem. Because you see, by the way, we have been doing trans-regional connectivity, India, China, Myanmar and Bangladesh. It's called BCIM corridor. Much before the One Belt One Road project came up. We've been exploring that. So, you know, India doesn't have a problem with connectivity, trans-regional connectivity. India is also a part of, you know, the second largest contributor to Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So, you know, I mean, but the position, our objection to, India's objection to BRI is one on sovereignty. The second, in India's assessment, you know, like a lot of stories you're reading now about the negative stories. Of course, there are a lot of positive stories about BRI plunging some countries into debt trap and all that. So India is also arguing that for BRI projects to be sustainable, it got to be underpinned by, you know, transparency, sustainable financing, green development, you know, ecological sustainability. So India has a problem which is primarily sovereignty focused, and also India has emphasized that BRI needs to be more consultative. Right now it looks like more like a China run show. Having said that, you know, what we have done, what India and China, the leaders have done, is to put aside that for the time being. You know, not to allow that BRI to become an issue in India-China relations.
This is very good.
Yeah.
Manish, very good indeed for you. Very much indeed for your very interesting expression of vision. We will speak later maybe more about Chinese-India relations, which are very interesting regional and geopolitical event in the future. Professor Griffiths, thank you indeed for your time that you
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's such a brilliant place to ask some questions about your book, essentially. And I know that you have already written one book about China, and now not only about China, about general situation of the world. I mean,
yeah.
Now we are on the eve of your second book. Yeah. What are the main priorities of these two books, and what is the main priority of your new book, which will be published?
Well, the first book, I followed the events of the Belt and Road. So I'd been to Western China 10 years ago, and when the train started going, I became excited. And then in September 2013, we had the announcement of this Belt and Road initiative. I thought, wow, you know, trains and mystery of Silk Roads. So I started following it, and I wanted to know what exactly is happening. And all of the literature was about the security. What is the threat? Is it rising China? What is the implication? And nobody said what was happening. So I started looking at trying to get some answers to my questions, and when I got those answers, nobody was writing about it, so I wrote my own book. And it starts with China's policy on the Belt and Road, and it says, what will infrastructure and trade facilitation, what does it actually do to promote trade and development? And then it traced the initiative. Now that, I should have known better. That was a mistake. That was the wrong book. Because you don't start with a policy. You should really start a book with what is the problem. And I didn't. I said, here is a policy and this could be the effects, but why should you have a policy like the Belt and Road? So the second book will be on the problem. And what is the problem? Is that we don't have infrastructure and we don't have good trade facilitation. So we start from there, and when you put the question that way, it's a different question, because the answer then is, well, who is making trade better and who is building this Silk Road? And then China comes into your story. So instead of the story beginning 2013, you have to say, well, where do you begin that story? Well, the obvious place to begin is around 1990. When the Soviet Union and the Comecon collapses, because within that you have a sort of Belt and Road almost, minus China, minus Western Europe, but in the middle all of those countries trade much more with each other than you'd expect from economic prediction. Don't trade very much, the levels of trade is low, but it is a fairly trade-intensive bloc. So when the Soviet Union collapses, all of a sudden the administrative barriers become national barriers. You have wars fighting in, well, Tajikistan, in the Caucasus, all of Yugoslavia collapses, and the most recent ones, of course, is in the Ukraine. So you have a situation where you've got a complete implosion of the old Belt and Road. So where does the answer start? Well, it starts with the European Union, which starts with its border countries. So it says, right, we try and help you, we put in methods, try and get your small industries going, we help your legislature, and we give you trade preferences, and slowly we eliminate all trade barriers. No trade barriers, we give you money to develop your infrastructure, and then they move ahead. And in the Ukraine, they're building roads from Kiev to the west, is being funded by European Union. All right, but there's money going in, and from Kiev to the east is the World Bank, and in the south of Ukraine, the last few months, I think they're sponsoring railway connections down to the Black Sea. So the answer is, who's building the Belt and Road? Part is European Union. Then you move further along, and you say, right, the railways goes through Central Asia. The road, the Asia-European, China-European road goes through Kazakhstan. Who's built the roads? Well, it's not China, it's Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. Who's upgrading the railways? The same story. Who's building the Trans-Caucasus? Well, Azerbaijan and Western aid agencies. So the infrastructural thing has been going on for 25, 30 years. Not the way the Chinese would like it, perhaps slower than they'd like it, but it's being built. Now, that doesn't underestimate China. Because 4,000 kilometers of that Belt and Road is inside China. All of that is built by them. And then the other thing, and the mistake is, you don't facilitate, I mean, how do you facilitate trade? You reduce costs and you allow people to access the market. You don't need to build infrastructure for that. We heard today that the train goes from central China to the European border. Very careful to say the European border in 10 days. But it takes 2 or 3 days, what they call dwell time, to get the containers on the trains. They get nicely through everywhere else, arrive at the Polish border, and it's not being able to cope. Sort of wait time there is 2 or 3 days, and then you go on. That's 6 days of your journey just hanging about. So part of what China's been doing is not just building the infrastructure in China, but is facilitating and breaking down these invisible costs, which, as I say, can double the length of a journey and make it much more unpredictable. So it's turned around, if you like.
Thank you very much indeed for your point of view, and I think you expressed and you trying to explain the other side of Belt and Road Initiative, because we usually in Ukraine and in Europe, some experts, politologists, they say that this is a kind of threat. I mean, for European Union, for trade, global trade. But now you show that there is some kind of bilateral, multilateral cooperation.
Well, I think it does 2 things. Firstly, if you created this story that it's all China, and China's coming with its money and it's grabbing influence, then you get scared. It's like having a baby and you're a child, and you tell the child a nursery story about a bad witch. And the child goes to sleep and they think it's a witch with all sorts of crap, and then has nightmares. So Europe makes its own nightmare. And the other thing is, Europe is, oh, what are we doing? How do we respond? I mean, a week or a month ago, former president of Austria, Schiller, wrote an article and he said, we can start, let's start now. I thought, huh? What do you think we've been doing since 1990? So the Europeans have put themselves in a minority story and have this all-powerful China. But that's partly China's fault, because China emphasizes its role in building the Belt and Road, which is great for the Chinese population, but it doesn't accept the story. So I think my story gives a more balanced picture, but it's also more inclusive for China, because instead of China challenging what's going on, it is in fact adding its resources and experience to what's going on. Don't forget, China doesn't make anybody build a railway or accept the conditions. Kunming, Singapore, people say, why is China building this railway? Well, because it's been in the ASEAN connectivity plan for the last 15 years. So these things already exist.
So Abdul, I really glad to see you for the second time. China,
that's true.
You don't know, but in Ukraine, Nigeria became one of the priorities in our external policy. You know, our president wanted to develop relations with your country. I don't know why. That's very interesting. However, my question concerning Chinese and Nigerian relations and Chinese and Africa. Why your country, why Africa is so important for China now? I mean, maybe it is political, geopolitical point of view. What is your opinion?
Well, you know, China used to be a developing country, and we used to share the same issues of underdevelopment, of infrastructural problems, unemployment, education, and all that. And when African countries see a place like China develop in 40 years, just in 40 years, all this tremendous growth that you see in China happened in the last 40 years. So we tend to see people that we have shared problems with before, but they've leapt forward. So there's a lot to learn. There are lessons to learn from China. How did they get to where they are in the last 40 years? What is it that we can do or we can learn from China that will improve our own infrastructure, that will improve our own education, our healthcare, our rails, our roads, and all that? So that is what is important for a lot of African countries. Secondly, our experience with Western countries leaves a lot to be desired. You know, we were colonized.
I know.
A lot of African countries were colonized. After colonization, and we see the kind of interest or interventions that Western countries do in Africa, much of it to our disadvantage. And then we see the kind of partnerships that we have with China, and the Chinese are, for now, I don't know the future, but for now, they are not too much interested in intervening or intruding into the politics of African countries. And that is very, very crucial for us, because we've seen the kind of interventions that Western countries have done and how it has affected us.
The consequences.
The consequences of what of these interventions are. So if we can engage countries like China and go into partnerships with countries like China, at the same time they give us the leeway. They give us the leeway to develop at our own pace and not intrude into our own internal politics. It's like the Chinese say, a win-win situation.
Hi. I know that you знаешь русский язык, но проще тебе говорить будет на английском языке, so we will speak English language. I'm really glad to see you here for the second time. We met last year in the same forum, media forum in Dunhuan in Gansu. I know that your country, Lithuania, is one of the countries who is the member of so-called format 16+1. This is some kind of cooperation with China and the European Union, some kind of European Union and Baltic countries. So, what is about the relations between China and Lithuania? Your countries is very far from each other. However, there is a bilateral interest, maybe some kind of economic intervention. What is happening here?
Well, yes, our countries are far apart, and there's one little country in between China and Lithuania. But the relationship between Lithuania and China is developing quite, I would say, quite okay. We're not really, as the Lithuanian government is, of course, understands the importance, growing importance of China, and Lithuanian businesses are also starting to get more and more interested in China, and Chinese are also getting more interested in Lithuania. But I would not say that this cooperation is very, very intense. It's happening, things are happening, but we are the Chinese. They like to invest in some of our projects, some of our, let's say, in the ports, Untitled, but we're looking at costs and benefits. And
we are like a gate to the European Union.
That's right.
Potentially.
That's right. That's right. But it's not. We are calculating not only economic benefits, but there is security benefits. We have to understand that Lithuania is committed EU member, is committed NATO obligations from those two organizations, and we do cooperation, but we are not over active in it. We just, as it comes, we do it as it comes, but we're not proactive in it.
Mr. Kahvagali, thank you very much indeed for your time. I know that we are very busy on this forum. Really, Sri Lanka is very interesting for Ukraine. I mean, in tourist sphere, maybe in economical sphere, in tea even sphere, because we like Sri Lanka. Tea is very popular in Ukraine. But nevertheless, if you speak about China and Sri Lanka, I know that China invests a lot of money in your national economy. You have a so-called specific relations with China. Is it historically, or is this kind of new level of bilateral relations?
No, this is not the new level of the bilateral relations. This is the previous times, previous governments. They did the rubber and rice agreement and all those things. This is Bandaranaike's government. From those days, Sri Lanka and China has a good relationship, and then after that, all of the people are talking about this China and the Sri Lanka friendship because of this former President Mahinda Rajapaksa's government. During that government, the Chinese government invested a lot to Sri Lanka. That's why most of the people are talking about this. So the Chinese government invested first artificial harbor. It's a port city. It's a big development to Sri Lanka. That's an artificial island. And the Hambantota port, they invested. And there are a lot of hotels, Shangri-La, and all those things. Matale Airport, lot. So after President Mahinda Rajapaksa went home on 2015 January 8th, but the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and President Maithripala Sirisena, they spoke with the they had the bilateral coordinations with the Chinese government, and they adjusted some things, and still the developments are going on.
Is it possible to say that China is your trade partner in trade? It's very important trade partner, one of the key trade partners.
Yes,
that's quite possible. It's quite possible. So, Michael, you are a unique person.
Yes.
First of all, you represent the Schiller Institute here, and you analyze the geopolitical features of China. You know the tendencies in modern geopolitics. So, how you can estimate the initiative One Belt One Road? What is the future of this initiative within so-called globalization?
Well, there's a lot you could say. Let's start this way. For the last 70 years, since the end of World War II, there was one financial system, and it was largely neo-colonial. So it was an IMF, London, Wall Street dominated system. If a nation wanted a loan, they had to go to that institution for a loan. It came with conditionalities. It was not oriented towards infrastructure. It was not oriented towards production and manufacturing in the various developing nations. It was largely to benefit those banks, to benefit that financial system monetarily. What China has initiated is a new financial system where they're now lending to nations for long-term development projects. This gives nations a choice. They can either go to the IMF, like Argentina is today, or Ukraine, with major problems associated with that, or you can go to China, and you can have long-term investment projects. It's creating a choice. It's also putting pressure on this Western financial system, because since 2008, all they've done is print money and bail out the banks. They've had no structural reforms, no changes. So we're at a point now where you're already beginning to see another global crisis. Turkey, India, Argentina, Indonesia, a lot of the developing nations. And I think you're going to have to see a new financial system, a new Bretton Woods needs to be initiated, and I think China's Belt and Road actually becomes the model, a foundation for that. Like Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal was for the first one, when Franklin Roosevelt initiated that project. But China's Belt and Road today provides a foundation for a new system.
So, I mean, this initiative can be successful, in your opinion?
Oh, I think
it depends on many other aspects.
I think it's already been successful. Today we heard from the China Development Bank, I think it was Vice Chairman, and he said that they're actually educating other nations on how the Chinese financial process works. The only way these projects are possible is that China has a regulated banking system, which means that specifically on one specific regulation, that you cannot take deposits and speculate with deposits. In the United States and all of Western Europe, if you put your money into a bank, that can be gambled with and leveraged 40 times over. In China, that cannot happen. And they've established policy banks to allow long-term credit for these projects to be funded. That's a credit system. It's different than what Wall Street and London are doing. It's what Alexander Hamilton did, it's what Abraham Lincoln did, it's what Sergei Witte in Russia did, it's what the Meiji Restoration in Japan was. It's the way you develop nations. So it can be successful. It will ultimately be the foundation for how we get out of this current financial crisis.
Oh yes. Thank for your brilliant and very accurate and brief comment about the current situation, and I think we will speak later in the future.
Good. Appreciate it.
So Dimit.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Meeting you again.
Yeah, again. Last year we met in Dunhuai in the north. Now we are in the south. Really, I'm very glad to see you. I know that Macedonia, your country, is a member of so-called format 16+1, which means a special cooperation between China and some Balkan countries and European Union.
Yeah, exactly.
What actually is happening between your country and China? Your country is very small, very far from China. You don't have borders, but China is interested in your country. It was Chinese initiative to develop relations with the country.
Well, particularly I will say no more than minute and a half that maybe if we make any connection between Macedonia and China, we will find in the past that we have developed a lot of attitudes together on the different levels, you know. But this is a good initiative here about Belt and Road, connecting the people and maybe connecting the both sides. It's widely. We can widely see it here exactly. Well, Macedonia actually is not on the route on the Belt and Road, but it's connected with the Balkans. It's connected from the both sides. You mentioned that we were in Dunhuang. Dunhuang is on the Silk Road. That is the north part of the Silk Road, where we have developing economy, developing trading, developing cultures, both cultures, not just Chinese, but all the cultures on the way on the Silk Road. Maybe that is the good thing that is happening from this Belt and Road. And the south way that we are now in the Hainan, it's good that developing China through the sea. You know, Macedonia is not a country that goes on the sea or goes on the ocean, so it's a continental country, but Macedonia can have a lot of benefit from this initiative, Belt and Road, especially cooperation with our neighbors who are bigger than us on the territory, and cooperation, of course, with China, which is now the new growing force in the world map, you know. And in every way, it's a benefit to cooperate with the big countries, not just China, Russia, and United States of America, United Kingdom, France. Absolutely.
Yes, you are telling the truth. I'm agreed with you, because the same features which you said actually, I think actual for Ukraine also. So we are not directly on the route, but we can benefit.
Absolutely, yeah, and that is the point of our gathering here, actually. To learn something, to steal something from the Chinese, in commas maybe, to steal something. Yeah, and to have new experience, you know. Maybe this what we are seeing here, we can implement it in the future in our countries. Yeah, and that is the perspective that I'm seeing.
This is a good idea. Thank you, Dimon.
Thank you, Andrei, again.
So, I'm very glad to see you here. I mean, the representative of media of Czech Republic. For us, for Ukrainians, it's very interesting to see the representative of Vyshyagrad's four, we call it, you know, with Hungary, Slovakia, Vyshyagrat group, Slovakia, and Poland. Actually, I know that Czech Republic is a member of the format which is called 60 plus 1, or plus 1 plus 16, yes?
16 plus 1, they say 16 plus 1.
Plus 1. And there are 11 countries from European Union and 5 Balkan countries. So this is some kind of specific initiative.
Yeah, it's like a strip. If you look at the map, it goes from the north to the south.
Exactly. When I speak about the relations between Czech Republic and China, what is happening between your countries? I mean, generally.
Well, in general, we had a huge dispute a few years ago because the former prime minister, one of the former prime ministers, invited Dalai Lama, and the Chinese are very sensitive to any invitation to Dalai Lama. Yeah. Well, you know, there is a difference when you talk to Dalai Lama on private soil. Like if you meet Dalai Lama in your house or anywhere else, the Chinese, it's okay. But the Dalai Lama the Prime Minister meeting was on the government soil, and the Chinese take it as an offense. And this happened sometimes in 2009, and basically the diplomatic relations between the Czech Republic and China went to like, you know, below zero. It was like absolutely below zero. But ever since 2009, it took like 3, 4, 5 years, and now I think it's back to normal, and we are just trying to develop some economic.
Actually, you're like a gate for them, the European Union.
I don't think so. Well, this is the nice thing about Chinese. They are very polite. So any country they come to, they say you are the gate. You are the gate for us to enter Europe. So they tell the Hungarians, they tell the Austrians, they tell the Poles. Everybody is the gate, Bulgaria, and they are just being nice. And they basically have a free competition to who is going to offer more and who really is going to become the gate to
real
Europe.
gate.
Yeah, but the process is very slow. I mean, the Chinese investment comes very slowly to the country.
What is the biggest problem?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that the demand and the offer don't meet. I think this is the crucial problem, because the Chinese are very keen to invest into infrastructure. And countries that are members of the European Union are not really ready to give up any strategic industry, especially not to such a big country like China. So if they're trying to buy a telecommunications company, they're trying to buy electrical grid company or something, this will be a huge problem for the countries, because they will be afraid that you are from Ukraine, so it's like selling the company to the Russians.
Well, a very, very interesting analogy. So thank you, Yaroslav, for your vision. I think we will speak more about Czech-Ukrainian relations, or maybe, but later, not now. Thank you very much indeed. Really, I wanted to make an interview with you in Kiev, but you always going, you was traveling. I know you were in Odessa. Maybe
yes, I was here just on a conference, National Expert Forum by Institute of Gorshenin, and so it was very nice and interesting. But we met here in China.
In China, in Hainan.
Finally.
Hainan. For me, you are a really brilliant expert. You know geopolitical features, you know geopolitical situation in the world. And when you speak about One Belt, One Road, when you speak about geopolicy, geoeconomy, I don't know, what is the main concept of this initiative, Chinese initiative? In your opinion?
It's very easy for me. For a number of years in history, China was isolated I mean, the concept of the Great Wall was just protect China from the influence of the, I mean, the world.
External.
And today they have another politics. And it's funny, but in the history of China, it was seasonal, to open the country or to close the country. And now it's a great opening, pretty smart, because the investment in infrastructure all over the world means, I mean, a belt, a transmission belt for China products in the future. Having such assets and a human force, having such money they have, having such a great discipline they have, etc. They will be a production hub for the next centuries. And now the current government wants to invest money just to make a highway for product transition to the west, to Africa, to the south, to Asia. It's a very smart policy. They are the biggest bank all over the world. They have billions of dollars because of international trade standards. And they are paying money just to make the future for their own country. I mean, the aggression from the point of view of China, I mean, Beijing is not military aggression.
Economical.
It's economic aggression, yeah? And it's very smart. It's a bit dangerous for us because they will be always competitive in production, especially for the Western world, for England, France, Switzerland, etc. Maybe not so much for Ukraine and Poland, but I mean, next centuries belong to them. No other question. Of course, if nothing especially important happened, I mean, for example, war or something. But in a peaceful line of history,
step by step,
they are becoming bigger and bigger power, economic power, and they need these open roads for their products for all over the world.
Actually, you represent here a very famous newspaper, very famous not only in Poland and in Europe, Rzeczpospolita, and you represent actually the country, one of the strongest country in the Europe. What will be the future of relations between China and Poland, and China and European Union? Because Poland is a member of format.
Yeah, and I believe that Poland will stay in the Union, but I think that we are losing our position from the point of view of the world competition. We are much weaker and weaker and weaker. And
you mean economically?
I think that we are, as Poland, we are closer to Ukraine in a sense of competitiveness. Because it's always a discussion, what will be the future of Poland or Ukraine, how to find a path to the future, etc., etc., etc. And we have a very simple answer. You are competitive, the labor is cheaper. So you are a great market for production. But what you need reforms, you need, I mean, better warranties for private property, I mean, a better legal system, no bribes. And that's the future for Ukraine, to be related with China as a hub, as a part of a chain of distribution. It's the same with Poland.
Gate to Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. For Ukraine, that's
and for Poland.
Because the future of your membership in Union is under big question. You have supporters, but you have also some enemies like Netherlands. They will never accept the presence of Ukraine in Union. But from the other hand, you don't need, in fact, Union, because if you stabilize situation in Ukraine, I'm in the sense of finishing the war happily, successfully,
hopefully,
just reforming the state, fighting with corruption, etc. You will have the precise mechanism for growth and the investment from China, Chinese money, Chinese technology, Chinese companies. I believe can find ideal place for development next to Europe.
You're right.
So what about the deals with China? Businesses with China, you are in a better position as Ukraine that we are. We are limited by common European policy. I mean, union.
Institutionally.
Yeah. So, for example, from my point of view, I support Chinese investment in Poland because we are still much worse in the sense of infrastructure, for example. It's the same with you. I mean, there's no big infrastructure in Ukraine and Poland. We need to have new railways, highways,
to get rid of the Soviet
ports,
heritage.
harbors, airports, etc. And the same in Ukraine. You have very old money
Soviet heritage.
Yeah, that's a Soviet heritage, and they are perfect. I mean, Chinese. If it's true that they are making 3,000 kilometers of a speed railway a year, it's enough for Ukraine or Poland to have such a. So I think that we should consider smart collaboration with China and have a policy of attracting them. That's a problem in Poland. There's the same problem in Germany, etc. I mean, the European Union knows it's a very much competitive actor on the stage.
Mansour, how are you?
I'm fine.
So thank you for accepting our invitation for this interview, because Afghanistan is very far country from Ukraine. However, we know a lot about Afghanistan because of war, because of different migration process. Actually, when we analyze this One Belt One Road initiative, Chinese, I know that Afghanistan geographically is very important for Chinese, and it is very important not only for Chinese, for the United States, and for Iran, and for the Russians, for all countries. But if we try to say specifically about China and Afghanistan, did you participate in this initiative officially, or you were just as a partner?
No, actually, first we were not included in this project, but then we included officially. So we are now part of this Belt and Road initiative because we are the neighbor of China. In this, they are talking about Silk Road. Actually, Silk Road was coming, going through Afghanistan. We have a border with China, land roads we had in that time, so now it's closed. So now, One Belt, One Road is very important for China and also for Afghanistan because we need economic development.
Bilateral.
And yes, and since 2001, China is helping Afghanistan in several areas. In several areas, yes. Just, they have spent lots of money there. So now, through this Belt and Road, so they will, once again, will find land roads, and it's very good for transportation. Right now, if China wants to, export their goods to European countries, so they should go around Central Asian countries. It takes almost 3 months. But if they cross through my country, through Afghanistan, it will take 1 week.
1 week.
So short, very short. So this is a mutual interest in this Belt and Road initiative because China will also be very benefited from this, and you surely will get lots of benefit.
What is about the security situation? Is China analyze your political and situation in security area?
No, actually, our government is committed for the both projects, for the One Belt, One Road, and for the TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. Those pipeline gas are going to Afghanistan. In that areas, so our government is maintaining security. So also the same in the Belt and Road. Those bridges or those roads that are going to Afghanistan, so our security forces are very capable to maintain our security.
And if we speak about the specific areas where there is some kind of cooperation between your countries, what are these areas?
Actually,
infrastructure, roads, I don't know.
So China is playing, a great role in making hospitals, bridges, roads. So and also helping in education, providing scholarships.
Humanitarian.
Yes, and also health. Recently, a bunch of children came here. They had a heart disease, so they came here. They gone under surgery here, so they went back to Afghanistan. So that type of.
It's very good that you have variety of cooperation. I mean, different areas. So thank you for your interview.
You're most welcome to play as well.
When I'll be in Kabul, we will meet.
Surely, definitely.
We will be in touch.
We'll be in touch. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Professor, thank you for your time, for your acceptance of our invitation, because we don't have plenty of time, because this is the past time forum, and we don't have much time to make a special program about China. But I know that you achieved, but you work in a very serious institute, and you know real China, because you have been studying China for many years. We studied geopolitics, we know the current situation in the world. We are from Ukraine, and now our country is the center of some kind of geopolitical battle.
Yes.
But thank you indeed for your interest to our country. I know you know a lot about Ukraine, about
strong ties between Ukraine and my province and my country.
Yeah. But if we speak about China, what is the perspective? What is the future of this initiative, One Belt One Road, with a geopolitical point of view? So, is it possible to imagine that it will continue its life within current globalization, globality?
I think it's a very deliberate policy. Of course, it was created by the current presidency, and it is his baby, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think in long term, in the long run, this is China attempting to expand its geopolitical space, particularly to the west, towards Central Asia. Now with Soviet Union gone, with independent republics there, it's an opportunity for China to establish opportunity without a lot of competition, really, given the decline of power of the Soviet Union. This is not an area of American strength. It's an area where China hopes to have the ability to draw resources, markets for its own goods, and transportation links to Europe. Part of it is simply pragmatic transportation. Part of it is a geopolitical thrust into Asia and towards Europe.
When we speak about the future relations between the European Union and China, for example, or China and United States, what will be with these relations? Rivalry.
There's going to be rivalry, 100% guaranteed. How far it goes,
the consequences.
Chinese were actually not big fans of President Obama.
Yeah.
There was a lot of friction there. They were initially enthusiastic about Trump. I think they're getting a bit nervous now. But this is, to me, it is a real trade war. How long it will last, we're not sure. But on December 31st, the amount of calm, of détente between Tokyo and Beijing, I think this is partly a side effect of the conflict between Washington and Beijing.
And about Russia and China?
This is a marriage of convenience.
Yeah.
I don't really think that either side is comfortable or relaxed with the other.
Yeah.
There's traditional rivalries there.
Undoubtedly.
And from the Chinese perspective, they won't say this publicly, but some of those lands which Russia has, they believe, were taken from China. There's nervousness in Russia about immigration. If you fly over those regions, you go over the border, on one side you see a zillion farms and high density population. On the Russian side, almost nobody's there. There are fewer people in all of Siberia than there are in Canada. That's a long-term risk for Russia, I think. And the population is actually declining in that region. So this is a marriage of convenience that will last maybe quite a while, but as long as it's good news for each side. But it's not something of genuine attraction or affection.
So we will see. Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah.
I'm very, very happy to meet a person from Singapore.
Yes.
I'm from Ukraine, but in our country, Singapore, especially the heritage of Lee Kuan Yew, became, I don't know, this is a symbol of economical growth, of economic development. So when we speak about Singapore and China, about this initiative, One Belt, One Road, about the globality, about all these geopolitical features, things, where is the role of Singapore, such small country, but with Chinese diaspora, Chinese language?
Yes.
How you succeeded in your relations between, with China, with such giant geopolitical country?
Obviously,
as you have mentioned, there's an asymmetry in sizes. So huge! It's like a whale and an ant.
Yeah.
But that said, many people will be astonished, will be surprised.
Yeah.
When I tell them that Singapore is the #1 foreign investor in China.
Yeah,
since 2013. Since 2013.
Yeah.
So this is 2018. So for 4 or 5 years running, Singapore's investments in China is bigger than any countries in the world. One would expect it to be United States or Japan and so on.
Russia.
But it's Singapore. Singapore is the largest investor in China. So that's really, really astonishing.
Yeah, really astonishing.
Yeah. Another unique feature of Singapore's relations with China is that Singapore is the only country thus far to have 3 government-to-government cooperation. Okay, cooperation enterprises, cooperation projects. The first one was the Suzhou Industrial Project in a city called Suzhou, where Singapore exported its model of industrialization, like a blueprint to build an industrial city. So our hope then was to share our experience, to transfer our knowledge to the city of Suzhou to establish an industrial park. That industrial park has been very, very successful. It's like a clone of Singapore. You go there and look at the environment, it's like a clone of Singapore, and our hope was that other Chinese cities would also learn from Suzhou and clone Suzhou in different cities, in different places in China. So that's the first project. Second project was the Eco City in Tianjin Eco City. So that project is an attempt, the effort on the part of Singapore to build an ecologically friendly city with energy, clean industries and so on. So it's our hope that over the years, eventually it will be a city of 500,000. But again, we hope that other cities in China can learn from the Singapore-initiated Eco City in Tianjin to build clean, beautiful public housing, clean energy, solar panels, windmills, and so on. That China can build 21st century clean cities. So that's the second contribution. So
you have a variety of contribution, yeah?
Yeah, and the third contribution is in Chongqing. We call it the Chongqing Connectivity Project. Chongqing Connectivity Project. Chongqing is a landlocked province, so we try to help them not only in terms of infrastructure, but maybe connectivity, technological connectivity, financial services, legal services, and also to link through Chongqing, the northern belt, the One Belt One Road, the northern belt, with the Maritime Silk Route, to link the north and the south. So that's what we are planning to do.
And about generally about One Belt One Road initiative, because your country actually is not involved directly in this project. However, what do you think about it?
You see, another astonishing figure, sorry to throw all these statistics, is that 70% of the money, the finances, the capital raised outside China for One Belt One Road projects come from Singapore. It's raised in Singapore. 70% of external funding outside China for One Belt One Road projects come from Singapore. So yes, we are small, but I think we have a value add. Singapore, I think, is the yeast which raised the bread. But we have to bear in mind that even though Singapore is small, it's a financial giant. China with a population US, let me say that again. China with a population of 1.4 billion, the national reserves of China is estimated to be US 3.1 trillion. US 3.1 trillion. But for Singapore, our foreign reserves
let me say that again, Singapore's foreign reserves are not publicly disclosed. It's kind of a so-called state secret. But I have no hesitation to suggest to you that certain economists in Singapore, I shouldn't mention a name, believe that Singapore, with a population of 5.6 million, we have actually more than US $1 trillion in terms of national reserves. So we have national conscription. We are a small country, but we have a very high-tech military for our self-protection. So we train with militaries all over the world. And Singapore as ASEAN chair, we just last week, Singapore and China co-hosted a maritime naval exercises in China.
I read about it.
In China, with the ASEAN countries, the ASEAN-China Maritime Cooperation.
Multi-country.
On humanitarian assistance and so on. So Singapore, yes, I agree with you, it's small, but it's small only geographically. But it is not small in terms of finances or military, or in terms of ambitions. We are also a diplomatic hub. When North and South Korea held their so-called secret talks. It cannot be all that secret because you and I are talking about it. But they used to hold their so-called secret talks in Singapore. And as we know, US President Trump and chairman, leader of North Korea, Workers' Party, held the summit in Singapore Summit. If our relations with both the US and North Korea have been poor, there's no way we could have hosted that summit. So over the years, Singapore had also added value. Since you asked me about China, we had also facilitated cross-strait relations between China and Taiwan. In 1993, 1993, the Wanggu talks, cross-strait talks, semi-official talks between China and Taiwan were held for the first time in Singapore. Yes, it's a neutral forum. You cannot hold it in Taiwan, you cannot hold it in the mainland, but they held it in Singapore. And President Ma Ying-jeou of Taiwan and President Xi Jinping of China held party-to-party talks. The Chinese Communist Party and the KMT, they held their historic summit for the first time since the Chinese Communist Party took control of China after the Civil War in 1949. The first summit between both sides, the top leaders of both sides, were held in Singapore.
Thank you. I think in future, when we come into Singapore, we will make a specific interview, because in Ukraine there is a serious require for more information about it.
Yes, but before we end, I just want to wish your news media and the people of Ukraine all the very best. I hope a restoration of peace within Ukraine and with its neighbors. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And I just hope a bright future for future generations. All the best for you personally, your family, for your media and for your country.
Hello. Shukran ala hadith. Thank you very much for your interview. I'm very glad to see you once, because we met in Dunhuan in Gansu.
Last year.
Yes, and I read a lot of information about Sudan, because I'm an Orientalist. I like this country. I have never been, but I like the history of your country.
Welcome.
Many friends of mine, we are in your country from Ukraine as a pilots of helicopters from that. That's why I heard a lot about your country. But when we speak about China and about Africa, about China and Sudan, what are the main areas of cooperation? Because China is very far from your country. This isn't Russia, this isn't Pakistan. You represent another culture, another traditions. China, this is another civilization. How you succeeded in your bilateral relations?
Okay, first of all, let us remove from geography to history. At first of all, Sudan as a partner in the historical initiative, One Belt and One Road. So since 200 BC, since Han Dynasty,
Silk Road.
So
at that time, the Chinese ship went to Sudan. So with no technology, with no plane or highway. So from that time, so there is historical relationship between Sudan and China. Then Sudan, one of the first country, were supporting China to take place in the international community.
Okay,
in 55 or 1965. So for all that reason, our relationship is very strong. You can say if the government is changing in Sudan several times, but our relationship are growing. Exactly. If there is democratic regime in Sudan or military regime, the same. So in last 2 decades, our relation is grow up fast because there is huge investment, Chinese investment in Sudanese oil sectors. Sudan looks like gate to Africa. So China starts from Sudan to another African country. You'll find the situation in Sudan looks like as typical African countries. There is many opportunities. There is huge potential resources in Sudan. For example, natural resources, mining, oil. Also, besides that,
rich country.
Agriculture, livestock.
Especially agricultural.
Yeah, for Sudan. Sudan, it was the biggest country before 2011.
Yeah, I know.
So there is many resources. So there is besides that, our relationship with China is good. There is no sensitive or there is no political harassment between each other. So Chinese people are investing in Sudan and make successful investment. So they moving from Sudan to another African countries. Now Sudan and African countries are looking for Chinese initiative to get most out of this benefit from this initiative. For example, there is as a developing country, there is lack of power. Especially in the electricity, our transportation network is not good.
It should be modernized.
So we need to improve our transportation.
Infrastructure.
And all the infrastructure inside as a national country, as a regional countries. So, for example, Sudan is if you look to the map, you will find Sudan in the northeast Africa or the east north Africa, besides the Red Sea. So there is many countries around Sudan without border. They called it closed country. So if it is possible, we are going to make. There is many plans to make or to create highway from Sudan through N'Djamena in Chad, Cameroon until Dakar. Also, there is another one from Sudan to Ethiopia, another link, and also there is also the third one from Sudan to South Sudan. Maybe in the future is going to be connecting with another network from Mombasa and Tanzania. So there is Chinese plan to make highway in all Africa, to mix like links, and then they connecting the natural resources areas, and also they are going to transfer. There is factories. They called it overcapacity. So the Chinese economy now is transferred from traditional economy with low price and something like they're going to be
more modern.
Exactly. So they are
high technology. Right?
Yeah. So China is going to transfer this to our country. We are. I think it will be better for understanding the Chinese experience, to understand the Chinese challenge, what happened to China in the last 40 years. For example, there is some problem with fast development. For example, like pollution. So we need to start with last techniques, with last Chinese techniques. They call the green development. We are going to take this concept. Also, we need to understand the new techniques in highway. We are not going, of course, we are not going to use the traditional one. So we are looking to improve or increase our transportation networks, manufacturing, and we hope to be in the future, if we get most out of this benefit and deal with Chinese initiative usefully, we are going to be in the top, in top African countries.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.